All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the History of Computers Part 2, the Babbage engines. And when you're working from home, jot down a couple things here for the right for discussion. What were computers like when you were younger? Are they different now, and how so? Feel free to pause the video, jot some of your thoughts down, and I look forward to reading them when you submit your work. All right, Charles Babbage, he was born December 26, 1791, in London, England. He is considered the father of the computer. He was one of 4 children, and his father was a banker. Babbage had a life-threatening fever at the age of 8, and he nearly died. He was home tutored for years before attending a 30-student academy. The academy had an extensive library where he developed a love for mathematics. He taught himself algebra. Think about that. For those of you who had me for algebra, you know the struggles of trying to learn something new. Charles Babbage taught algebra to himself. Babbage returns home to study at a new school. His new tutor was also an Oxford professor. This tutor helped him reach elite levels of knowledge in classical learnings. This helped him get accepted into Cambridge University. He was extremely disappointed in the mathematics professors at Cambridge. He would often correct them and had surpassed their work. He was the smartest mathematician on campus, but he did not graduate with honors because he refused to take his final examination. He thought that he was too intelligent to take it. It was insulting that they asked him to take it. It was beneath him. As I did with Jacquard, I always take a brief moment to pause and notice a striking resemblance between Charles Babbage and Terence Stamp. Over the course of the next 10 years, Babbage applied to many teaching jobs, but he was never hired because of his poor reputation. As you can see from the previous slide, he was kind of a jerk, refusing to take his final exam. He just carried that reputation around with him. So, for as bright of a human being that he was, he had to depend on his father's money to live. When his father passed away, he inherited all of his money, which was roughly about $10.2 million today. His wife died the same year, and he decided to spend his money traveling the world and writing books about his ideas for a difference engine or calculator that could make math simpler. And just like Jacquard did for his loom that created fishing nets in England, Babbage wins a gold medal for his ideas on this new difference engine. After being rejected 3 times as the position of head mathematics professor at Cambridge, his old university, he ends up being hired in 1828. For 11 years, working at Cambridge as the head mathematics professor, he did not teach at all. He did absolutely nothing. Instead, he chose to write 3 books during his time in the classroom. So imagine that, you all sitting in my classroom as I am jotting down thoughts into books and ignoring you guys entirely. His colleagues hated him, and he never gave a single lecture. Babbage was known for spending his money wildly. He would throw huge parties in London on his properties every Saturday night for intellectuals only. You had to be smart to get in. Although his co-workers hated him, the rest of London at least pretended to like him to join in on these festivities. In Babbage's time, complex math problems were solved by hand. Right? We're all fortunate enough to have graphing calculators in each of our classrooms now. Babbage's time, everything was done by hand. There were absolutely no calculators. mistakes were almost always made. When he studied as a kid, he would find errors and mistakes throughout the textbooks that he was learning from. So imagine that. No calculator, has to do everything by hand, and Charles Babbage is smart enough that he could look at a textbook and find errors within the textbook. He believed that machinery could do simpler calculations to make mathematics quicker and more accurate. The difference engine. This is an inspired Babbage. Ends up designing the difference engine, which was a giant calculator. The difference engine was designed to only perform addition and was powered purely on steam. Babbage also wanted this machine to print the calculations out on paper, thus designing the first ever printer. However, the craftsman he paid to create the actual engine was charging him way too much money. So after many arguments over payment, they end up shutting down production entirely. Let's see if I can blow this up for you guys. Then he moves on to his next invention, the analytical engine. He decides to try again and designs the analytical engine. This steam engine was designed to perform the 4 basic functions of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Users would input math equations using punch cards. This idea borrowed from Jacquard's loom, our previous lesson. This machine would also print the results of the calculations. He wanted the engine to have input, output, memory, and a central processing unit, CPU, which stored numbers and calculations. He called it the mill. These are your 4 basic functions of any computer today. Here's just a view of what the analytical engine was going to look like. You have your labeled the store, the mill, the steam engine, the printer, your operation cards, as you can see here, very similar to the Jacquard loom. Now, this woman over here on the right-hand side plays a major role in the designing of the analytical engine. Her name is Ada Lovelace. She is now credited with creating the algorithm that allowed the engines to perform calculations. This is an incredible feat for a woman given the time period. However, Babbage, unsurprisingly, refused to ever give her credit. The reason we know Ada Lovelace is responsible for creating the algorithms that would allow these machines to perform these calculations is because notes were recovered of these algorithms, and they were written in her handwriting, not Babbage's. In one journal, she wrote, "We may say most aptly that the analytical engine weaves algebraical patterns just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves." Now that's really cool that she wrote that, acknowledging, the advancements and achievements of Joseph Marie Jacquard with his Jacquard loom. Now they're taking those concepts and applying them to build a giant steam-powered calculator. Although Babbage had many designs for these engines, he could not afford to build them, despite being richer than most people. most of his projects ran out of funding before he could complete the machines. Babbage died on October 18, 1871, in the same home that he lived in his entire life while working on his machines. Many of his notes on how to program steam engine machines have been lost. Babbage's son Henry continued his father's work. This is Henry here. And as an old man, he ended up creating the difference engine number 2. But it did not fully function. So although they had these designs down on paper, algorithms written down, they could not get a physical Babbage engine to work. British researchers are pooling together hundreds of millions of dollars to finally build Babbage's engines. They hope to complete it by the 150th anniversary of Babbage's death in 2021. Some fun facts here. Babbage's brain is on display at the Science Museum in London. This is it right here. And there he is on the back wall. And another fun fact to relate this to gaming, he was featured in the strategy game Civilization Revolution. And he's one of the great thinkers that you can settle in your civilization. Don't forget, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to my Google Voice number and definitely submit your work either through Google Voice or email.